Hello everyone, my name's Tom and I'm back to talk to you about, guess what? Formula 1 Fantasy. Yep, that's why you're here. That's why you clicked on the video, so let's get on with it. So in this video I'm going to be talking about a couple of different things. The first thing I want to talk about is just very quickly looking back on Saudi Arabia, because let's face it, Saudi Arabia was like a million years ago. I can't remember what happened. But no, it's important to look back and just see what happened briefly. Then I'm going to look ahead to Australia and think about who the best team is, naturally. And I think there's currently two trains of thought. Like there's two meta picks, if you want to call them, or template picks, however you want to describe it. And those picks are obviously Ferrari constructor, Magnussen and Bottas, Leclerc as turbo driver, and then the final two slots in most teams are most likely some combination of Verstappen and Ocon, or Perez and Sainz. And I want to have a quick look at what I think is the best option between those two. You can see this is from Saudi Arabia. I went with the Verstappen Ocon lineup, and maybe slightly fortunate with the whole safety car thing, screwing up Perez's race. But according to the article from the Formula 1 website, which looked into the hypothetical race if there was no safety car, blah, 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 kind of showed that Perez was lacking in the race pace compared to the Ferraris and Verstappen, and would likely have been overtaken by at least Leclerc and Verstappen and possibly Sainz. So can Perez match Verstappen? So we're gonna have a quick look at that, and then just kind of give my general opinion, because that's basically all I do. I talk into a microphone, giving my opinion, and you guys seem to like it. So yeah. So after I've done that, I'm also going to have a look at the spreadsheet. Quick sneak peek. Whoa, spreadsheet! It's so colourful. But anyway, we're going to keep it on the screen for a second. So we're going to have a look at the spreadsheet towards the end of the video, and look at some possible trends that we can pick out, and see who potential bargains are, and yeah, we'll see how we go. So looking at Max and Perez. Good old Max Verstappen here. Because we've only got we've had two races this season, so there's not a lot of data to go on. So I'm kind of looking back further to last season, when obviously there were 22 races. So we've got a lot of data from last season as to how Max and Perez lined up against each other. And I think it's quite a big factor in deciding whether you want to go with Max and Ocon over Perez and Sainz combination. So last year, Max Verstappen scored in fantasy points, this is 846 fantasy points. Perez scored 459 fantasy points. So Perez's points as a percentage of Max's points from last year was 54%. And then we look at the price of Perez this year and compare that to Max's price as a percentage, it's 58%. So if they're going to perform fairly roughly as they were last season, you currently would be paying more for Perez in terms of the cost of Max, relative to the number of points that you might be getting if the performance is to continue as of last season. I hope that kind of makes sense. So yeah, 58% of the price of Max, but you're getting 54%. So it's kind of a slight overpaying perhaps for Perez this season, even though he's priced around the 17 million mark and Verstappen's over 30 million. But just interesting kind of thought, just something to bear in mind really. Like I say, Mr. Verstappen, well, we can call him Mr. Verstappen if you want to. Max Verstappen is Mr. Consistent, because last season he had 17 podiums. Perez only had 6 podiums. I'm sure you've all seen the stats. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what it is, but basically when Max Verstappen finishes a race, he finishes either first or second. First, second, or DNF, pretty much. That's what you get with Max Verstappen. He's super consistent. So you're paying the premium of 30.4 million, but you're getting big money for what you're paying for. Big points for what you're paying for. Okay. So yeah, head to head, definitely I think Max is head and shoulders above Perez, and that's one of the reasons why I went with him in last week's build of Saudi Arabia. However, we can't, if our teams are just based on the best drivers, then we'd just have literally all the most expensive people win here, probably, wouldn't we? But we have a budget, so we have to take into account who we can squeeze in with that budget. And at the moment, probably the best option to tag along with Verstappen is Ocon, hence his price rises recently. So we now we can't just compare Max and Perez. We have to also compare Max and Ocon versus Perez and Sainz, so as a combination. So again, if we look at the price of Max and Ocon currently, it's 42.8 million, and they've produced 91 points. So that gives us a points per million per race of 1.06. And then you look at Perez and Sainz, who combined are 35 million, have produced 85 points, which gives a points per million per race of 1.21. So you got 1.21 points per million per race with Perez and Sainz, 1.06 with Max and Ocon. So according to the numbers there, you're looking at Perez and Sainz producing better value. Now, it is important to bear in mind that this is only based on 2 races, and the numbers are slightly skewed probably by like DNFs and things. But that's all we got to go on this season. So points per million per race, Perez and Sainz currently slightly outscoring the Max Ocon build. Obviously, Max is a supreme option to put the Mega Driver on if that comes around at some point. There's options. I'm sure a lot of people will be Mega driving Max Verstappen in Imola, which is the race after Australia, because it's a sprint race and you can get a few extra points in the sprint, which we'll discuss that in a couple of weeks' time when it's nearer the time. But I think going into Australia, slightly like the numbers slightly favour the Perez-Sainz combo. The Perez-Sainz combo also allow you to have Red Bull as your constructor, which is if something that you're interested in, which certainly is something I'm interested in. Again, possibly in Imola, depending on how the streaks play out, because Red Bull could be on a race streak by then, so it's quite likely we'd want Red Bull as our constructor for Imola. You definitely want Ferrari as your constructor this week because they're on a qualifying streak and a race streak, so you get an extra 15 points up for grabs if they qualify in the top 10 and finish the race in the top 10, which is quite likely, let's face it. So yeah, Ferrari constructor this week, possibly Red Bull for the following race. Also, looking like really far ahead, the Perez-Sainz combination, if they're still template at that point, going into round 11, I know this is like a million miles in the future, but the way it falls, Austria falls is in round 11, is that if Max finishes in the top 10 for the next 8 races straight, he would then fall. His race streak would then fall on Austria, so he'd be on a race streak and on a sprint race in Austria, and therefore you can Mega drive Verstappen and go crazy for points, especially as Max is super strong in Austria anyway. But yeah, anyway, that's by the by and far into the future. Let's not worry about that. Anyway, so yeah, overall I'd say probably Perez and Sainz currently slightly favourite, even though they didn't do quite so well in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, let's have a look at the spreadsheet. Here we go, spreadsheet. So it's updated with lots of different colours and things, and whoa, columns and different tabs. Whoa. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at the points per million again. These numbers are slightly inflated because of the fact we've only had 2 races, so take it with all a pinch of salt. Has clearly doing really well, just over 3 points per million per race, so the best, obviously. This is a bit strange. I don't actually know what happened with the fact that Schumacher didn't lose any points for not taking part in the race, but Tsunoda, who took part in the formation lap and then backed out, ended up getting deducted fantasy points as a result. Very strange. So that kind of skews the numbers and has its favour against the likes of AlphaTauri, who have got terrible points per million at the moment. But yeah, the fact is, Haas are offering fantastic value, and that's why their constructors' price is going up at the moment. Obviously, although they're brilliant value, they have only produced 19 points, which is not a lot, let's face it, when we compare it to the big teams who are producing like almost 70 points, 45, 33, etc. So the main bulk of the points is still going to come from the likes of Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, but has still, they're a good enabler. I'd describe them as coming in at 3 points per million. Obviously Ferrari also producing great value, considering their price coming in at 2.7 is also insane. So yeah, Ferrari constructor for the win. Now interestingly, let's have a look down at the drivers. Again, points per million, Max and Hamilton kind of evenly split at the moment due to Verstappen's DNF. Magnussen, no surprises, at 3.42 at the moment. People that interest me down the bottom here are the likes of, if we scroll this across, the likes of Albon, Guan Yu and Stroll. So if we look at Albon here, so his points per million at the moment is 1.58, which is really strong. We look at everyone else, like you've got Magnussen, who's head and shoulders above everyone, Leclerc and Ocon, and then in 4th place for value is currently Albon. That's helped to some extent by Latifi having a terrible start to the season, crashing out in Saudi Arabia and just generally not being very good at the moment. So he's sort of you can see he's out qualifying and out racing his teammates, he's getting points for that. The DNFs ahead of him, there's been a few DNFs in each race, so he's automatically sort of moved up the rankings there. So you can see points gained from going ahead is 8 points for Albon. So I think the points gained and loss is really important for these smaller priced, like to look for where the value is in combination with their points per million. You want to look at how much like overtaken that they're doing. So Guan Yu and Stroll interest me for that reason. Stroll, although has been, well, I'll show you in a second, he's not been qualifying well, but because of DNFs he's kind of moved up, and the Aston Martin seems kind of reliable, if not that fast. But so he's got quite a few points because of that, and he's coming in at 1.32 points per million per race at the moment, so also good value. It'd be interesting to see how he gets on with Vettel back in the mix. Vettel's going to be coming in cold from having COVID, so he doesn't have as much experience with the car and everything, and just being up to speed with general like race pace and everything. So it'll be interesting to see how Vettel and Stroll get on, and who's going to sort of win that competition this weekend. Yeah, and also Guan Yu interests me at 14 points. That's really good. That's like in 2 races. That's seven positions gained. Really interesting because obviously Bottas has already proved that the Alfa Romeo is a fast car. It's like it's going to be competing at the top of the midfield by the looks of it with like the Hazes and the Alpines this season. So Bottas has already proved, everyone's jumping on the Bottas train. But Guan Yu coming in slightly cheaper, offering really good points per million at 1.46 after the first 2 races. The fact that Guan Yu is going to be out qualified probably and out raced by Bottas is kind of puts me off a little bit, but it's also kind of a heads up for the fact that as a constructor, Alfa Romeo are doing, where are we? Alfa Romeo here, 2 points per million per race, 17 points. So kind of on par points wise with the Hazes, even though they don't offer quite the value because of their price. But Guan Yu, he's got a really good car, and the fact that he's already overtaken 14 like shows that he could be scooping up these sort of points at every race. I know again these numbers have been inflated by DNFs, but if Guan Yu can qualify like 14th, for example, and he's got a faster car than the people in 13th, 12th, 11th, he's going to be gaining those extra like 4, 6, 8 points per race, which is really, really significant. So Guan Yu is someone I've got my eye on as well. Perez is a slight concern looking at these numbers because he's lost 16 points. 16 points is kind of huge, to be honest. Like I say, I wouldn't worry too much about this because Perez is generally going to be finishing the top 4, and for finishing the top 4 you're going to get a chunk of points anyway, so it kind of negates some of the points lost if you like what happened in Saudi Arabia where he qualified first and finished 4th, so he's lost points for that. But it is still a slight concern that Perez may be not doing so well in the race compared to how he qualifies. But again, based off 2 races, so we'll see how that develops. Something to keep an eye on. Could be an argument against the Perez-Sainz combo. Also, with the whole thing with Perez and Sainz, you look at Leclerc here on 0 points and Sainz on 2 points. They're not, because they're going to qualify in the top 4 like every race. You're not really going to get many points for climbing places. You're basically at risk every time of losing points, as Perez has proven. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to have a look at a couple of trends. So this is from Bahrain. We've got the practice sessions and the qualifying and the race, etc., etc. So a couple of things I want to have a look at that. So in Bahrain, it's interesting here. In qualifying over here, I can see the average position that they've achieved in practice and how that translates into qualifying, and then obviously from qualifying into the race. Now I've obviously only got the figures from 2 races, Bahrain and Jeddah, but it's interesting to see, and I'm hoping that these numbers and everything are going to, after a few races, will give us some trends, and we can hopefully pick out who's doing well in practice, how does that translate to qualifying, how do they go from qualifying into the race, and as to how that affects their points looking forward. So in this column here, like I say, average position in practice. So this figure is taken based on how they've done in practice across the 3 sessions, averaged out. How are they out the top, out of 20, and are they out qualifying what they're doing in practice, and can we see any trends? So a couple of things, I'm just going to point out a couple of things because I could talk all night about it. You can probably gather that I like to talk. But a couple of things I want to look at is Alonso and Ocon. So basically Alpine. So Ocon, average position, this is in Bahrain obviously, average position in practice, he was averaging 14th, he comes in 11th. We look at Alonso, averaging 9.7, comes in 8th. So they're qualifying a position or 2 higher up than they are looking in practice, which is interesting. We go to Jeddah, we find Ocon, average position in practice 7.3, qualifies 5th. We look at Alonso, average position in practice 10th. qualifies in 7th. So both races so far, the Alpines have sort of flattered the deceive a little bit. That's not the right expression, is it? They've done the opposite of flattered to deceive, whatever that means. So basically, they've not done so well in practice, but they've actually done well in the race. And then obviously that does leave them at slight risk to losing points, because they're probably not going to be getting overtaken points from here, but high risk of losing points. As we can see, if we go across, we can actually in fact see that Ocon lost a position, so he lost points, and obviously Alonso DNF, so he gets minus 10 points. But it's kind of curious. I want to see if that trend continues. Do the Alpines continue to sort of, not quite hit the mark in practice, and then they get the setup nailed on and nail their lap in qualifying and do really well? So that's kind of interesting looking forward. I want to see if that trend continues. Another thing I want to look at is Gasly. So Gasly P1 over here, and then he comes along here in P13. That gives Gasly an average position of 10, and he comes in at 10. We look at Jeddah. Where is he? Here he is. So Gasly in 9th position, average position in practice was 8th, qualifies in 9th. So I know, again, only 2 races, but Gasly is showing that perhaps we can identify where he will qualify based on his position in practice, roughly. It's again going to be interesting to see if that trend continues, and then it could be a last minute switch, or Gasly is going to be really strong on this. Like if we go to Australia and Gasly is like consistently in practice, like going like consistently like 5th or something in practice, that means is he likely to also qualify in that position and therefore have a good race? So that's something I want to look out for. Develop these spreadsheets each race. I'm going to put an extra tab in, and we'll see if this trend continues. And the other thing I wanted to look at was Stroll. So again, based off 2 races, Stroll in Bahrain qualifies in 19th, has a stinker, but in practice his average position was 12th, which is he should have been up here. He should have been qualifying alongside Ocon and Schumacher at Norris, but he goes down all the way down 19th. So immediately it makes me think, oh, Stroll, he's doing well in practice, but he can't step up to qualifying. We go to Jeddah, we look at Stroll again, 15th. Not great. Average position in practice was 13.7, so not a great difference, but still a drop. So I want to see if this trend continues as well. Is Stroll going to be averaging a poor position and then dropping down? So which with the DNFs has helped him, as we've seen. Where is he here? Stroll. So he's gained 4 points in Jeddah, and in Bahrain, Stroll gets the maximum 10 points for overtakes because of DNFs. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how Stroll as develops as an option, because he's in that price bracket alongside Bottas, Guan Yu, that sort of price range. And there's only really one slot in our teams at the moment. At the moment, most people have probably gone for Bottas, and justifiably so. But Stroll is certainly an interesting one to look out for. So I'm going to be following that trend as well. So that pretty much sums it up. I'm hoping that I haven't bored everyone already into submission. I'm sure most people will probably fallen asleep after 5 minutes if they made it this far to the video. I want to congratulate you. But to sum up, basically, the teams themselves, the drivers, they're still learning the cars. They still don't know exactly what's going on. So all we can do is follow what's happening in the races, look at the data after each race, see what the teams are saying, and sort of go from there. So yeah, I'm going to be keeping track, adding to this spreadsheet as we go along, seeing where the value is, looking at the points per million, etc. Looking ahead at each race, seeing how the qualifying, if there's any trends we can pick out from qualifying, and see how we can affect that in picking the best team. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. Probably be doing another video nearer to the deadline, and so yeah, like, sub, all that stuff. Bye.